Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Effects of Gravity. My name is Ed Keller. I am the co-director of Postplanetary and Universal Design at the New Center. This is a program I co-direct with my partner and better half, Carla Leitao, architect. The New Center is a transdisciplinary education project which includes programs in critical curation, critical philosophy, transdisciplinary studies, and universal design, postplanetary design. I first became aware of the Effects of Gravity project through conversations with Alvaro Domene, the guitarist and composer of the soundscapes and music for this project. My training is as an architect, as a transdisciplinary thinker and designer, but also as a guitarist and a composer in a previous lifetime. I have a strong connection to the cosmological themes in this project, as for many years I've taught research seminars in studios focusing on what we call post-planetary design, an encounter with geopolitics and ecology through science fiction films, novels, and political theory and philosophy. Across the past year, I've had a number of conversations with Alvaro, who I believe I first met in 2016 at an event I hosted in New York at the New School when I was directing the Center for Transformative Media there at the time. I had been organizing and hosting many events, lectures, performances, workshops, which were focused on exploring the limits and future of guitar design and the limits and future of guitar. In that particular event in 2016, we hosted for Joel Harrison's Alt Guitar Summit. The two guests that night were Elliot Sharp and David Torn, musicians who had been for decades huge inspirations for me, and it turned out friends, colleagues, and inspirations for Alvaro as well. In subsequent years, I spent some time recording and performing work on guitar, which attempted to take on a number of cosmologically scaled and philosophically motivated themes, which have been points of contact also with Alvaro, who has been an incredibly generous listener and colleague for me. So this is one of the lines of connection to this project, The Effects of Gravity, through the world of sound as a path to a study of and a reflection on the cosmos. Let me say a few brief words about the project. The Effects of Gravity is a survey of and meditation on the ways that gravity has functioned as a generative catalyst, a substrate for everything we know across the history of our universe. The project traces these effects from the largest structures in the cosmos down to planet Earth. Episode 1 approached the scale of galactic mergers. Episode 2, structure formation. Episode 3, galaxy formation. Episode 4, star and planet formation. And tonight in episode 5, we approach planetary systems. We're in the next to last episode, and we're close to home as we cross the Oort cloud and zoom into our own system. In the words of the creators of the project, the goal of this project is to produce and eventually tour The Effects of Gravity, a live multimedia stage production exploring through equal parts music, poetry, and astrophysics our cosmic origins, with the hope that a broader perspective helps us become better stewards of the Earth. The project gathers the collective voices of spoken word artist David Gonzalez, composer-guitarist Alvaro Domene, and astrophysicist Dr. Luke Keller. This evening's episode is part of a multi-month rehearsal and preparation process during the COVID pandemic, and it anticipates a live production of the show when theatrical gatherings are again safe and possible. You can view the previous episodes on the Effects of Gravity YouTube channel. We encourage you to use the YouTube live comments channel tonight to ask questions and leave comments. We have a good banner there reminding you of that. Please do put on headphones, both for the episode and the conversation afterwards. And please join me in viewing episode 5 of Effects of Gravity.
Cloud. Outermost region where small icy bodies Our solar system formed from a disk of gas and dust orbiting the young sun. It's a very big place. This blue haze represents the Oort cloud, the outermost region where small icy bodies swarm in circular orbits, or nearly so. Some travel in highly elliptical orbits, squashed trajectories that periodically visit the inner solar system. We call them comets. From the edge of our solar system, the familiar planets are not even visible. We must zoom in to see even the orbits of dwarf planets like Pluto, some 4 billion miles from the Sun. Now, we enter the orbits of the outer planets, ice giants Neptune and Uranus, and then the more massive gas giants, Saturn and Jupiter. From Saturn, looking back towards Earth, we look so tiny, so inconsequential, seemingly powerless in this vast interplanetary space. And yet, we created machines that have visited all of these planets, and one of the Voyager spacecraft has traveled far beyond the planets on its way to the Oort cloud and then out of our solar system. Early in the history of our solar system, small, rocky bodies bombarded the planets just after they formed. So we must pause to be thankful for Jupiter. Its gravity shepherded these asteroids into orbits that now mostly stay out of the inner solar system, the realm of the small, rocky planets Mars, Earth, Venus, and Mercury. Early on, comets and asteroids brought water from the icy outer solar system, impacting the Earth so that we have oceans. Now, though, thanks to Jupiter, such encounters are rare. We orbit in the solar habitable zone, where surface water is liquid on most of our planet's surface most of the time. Not too hot, not too cold. Chemistry enabled life, single cells at first, to flourish in this moist and warm ecosystem about 3 billion years ago. We're still here. From the large-scale structure in dark matter and primordial hydrogen helium clouds that formed the first stars and galaxies, to the spiral galaxies themselves, to collapsing clouds that are still forming stars, to the whirling disks that form solar systems, the effects of gravity turned gravitational potential into this blue world with its many physical and ecological systems. It must have happened billions of times in our galaxy alone, but this is the only world we know with outward-looking, questioning, pondering organisms that send spacecraft to explore their planetary system and to see how small they look from afar.
To proclaim the existence of planets outside our solar system was heresy, then hyperbole, then hypothesis, then holy shit. 1995, Dimidium is discovered orbiting 51 Pegasi in the constellation Pegasus. To those who labored to develop microlensing, praise. Doppler spectroscopy, praise. Transit timing variation, praise. As of today, 3,212 planetary systems have been detected. 4,331 exoplanets have been confirmed. 5,708 candidates await confirmation. Ready, SETI, go. Three bears sitting on a log in front of their woodland cabin, passing around a dog-eared copy of Joseph Campbell's The Power of Myth. Mama Bear reads, "Orthodoxy is the death of any mythology." Papa Bear, "God is a metaphor for that which transcends all levels of intellectual thought. It's as simple as that." Baby Bear, "Follow your bliss, and the universe will open doors where there are only walls." Mama, "Can I have some more honey?" Goldilocks, listening nearby, swallows a spoonful of porridge, says, "Just right."
Hi, everyone. Ed Keller again. Thank you so much, Effects of Gravity team, for that great episode. I'd like to introduce the team one at a time now, and each of them will say a brief word or two about the project, this episode. And we have a set of questions that I've prepared, and I imagine we'll be receiving some in the live chat, which we can float to the group. Let me start with Dr. Luke Keller. Luke Keller is a professor of physics and astronomy at Ithaca College in Ithaca, New York. His astrophysics research focuses on the formation of stars and their planetary systems. Luke, can you join us?
Thanks, Ed. So this is exciting. You know, we set out in late 2019, actually, to create a live stage performance that integrates art, specifically poetry and music, with the scientific process in understanding our origins. And then the pandemic refocused all of our priorities and precluded live performances for the most part. So we decided to continue our creative process and some elements of the performance online, just to keep the juices flowing, so to say. And we're nearing the end of the 6 episodes. We started with the largest structures in the entire universe, then galaxies, then the formation of stars, then the formation of planets, and now we've arrived at our solar system.
And you're intending to do later this year a kind of a live rehearsal performance?
Yes, the next step in our plan would be to, when it's safe to do so, actually integrate the entire performance on stage without a live audience, and then make that available. Yeah. We hope to gather some interest from, we're thinking college theaters and local theater. The audience is basically all ages, but we're specifically focusing on young adult audiences, folks interested in science or music and poetry.
Yeah. Great. Let me bring Alvaro in. Alvaro Domeni is a Madrid-born, New York-based guitarist and composer. He operates at the convergence of various styles of contemporary music. His sound and compositions are influenced by the jazz and Western contemporary classical traditions, as well as metal music. Alvaro co-directs Illuso Records, an independent record label dedicated to supporting and distributing creative new music. He's also the artistic director at the Singularity Music Series in Kingston, New York, which is where you're based. Is that correct, Alvaro?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. How's it going, Ed? Good to see you.
Good
to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you want to say a little bit about what you were thinking about during this particular episode?
Yeah. Right before we started, when we were doing a little sound check, I was thinking about this and about this particular episode and how much, basically I realized how crucial and how much relevance the visuals have, and how much my creative process for this project is inspired and completely catalyzed by them. As the composer and musician in this project, my contribution explores the interconnection between astrophysical imagery, sound, and our imagination. Through this music that I'm writing, my aim is to express both the emotional experience of witnessing galactic phenomena and the imaginary sound of said phenomena, because we don't really know exactly how those things sound like, right? So I'm trying to put people in that space. So coming back to this episode, my special gratitude to Professor Keller for really going out of his way to make the visual aspect of this video possible, because he worked his ass off on this. And that is what I just really realized, that I completely depend on the visual aspect. That is what really gets my creative juices going in the project.
Fantastic. I'm going to come back to that when we have the when everybody's on board and we have the Q&A session, because I'm very interested in that relation too. I'd like to introduce David Gonzalez. David is a storyteller, a musician, a poet, a playwright. He received the Lifetime Achievement Award from International Performing Arts for Youth and was nominated for a Drama Desk Award for his original production of The Frog Bride. His poetry has been featured at Lincoln Center's Out of Doors, Bill Moyer's Fooling with Words, and NPR's All Things Considered. He's the author of numerous plays which have been presented at Lincoln Center, the Kennedy Center, the LA Music Center, and many other venues. David received his doctorate from New York University's School of Education. Welcome, David.
Hey, thanks, Ed. Thanks so much.
Hey, thank you. Can you give us a couple of thoughts that took place while you were working on this episode?
This was a tough one for me. And that might be odd because it's the place as we get closer to planet Earth, you'd figure there'd be more known, more stuff that I could draw from. Though my inspirations for this were kind of oblique. I mean, the Three Bears and Goldilocks. Well, Joseph Campbell. And then there's this technical side too. I mean, I really wanted to give praise to the folks who made this kind of research possible. So my poem here is actually in two distinct stanzas. One, which is around the actuality of the research and kind of a praise poem for that. And then this whole thing about the Goldilocks zone, just right. Well, I just went with it. I'm a big fan of Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist. And there's something about getting the knowledge of where we are in the universe to bring that into our contemporary understanding of meaning making and where mythology comes to play in that. So anyway, I just went with it. And that has been a fun part for me in this process, is to find this balance of being responsible to the scientific content and understanding, and also allowing the poetic mind and the poetics to flourish as they come forward.
Fantastic. Thank you. Are we bringing everyone on simultaneously? Yeah. Hey, folks. David, that seems like a great transition to one of the first broader questions for the team. I'm thinking back to my own experience as a youth reading D'Aulaire's Book of Greek Myths, which is, if you don't know it, it's an illustrated kind of very simple, not for very young children, but for children, summary of some of the Greek myths, beautifully illustrated by the D'Aulaire's. And in revisiting it with my kids now, my young kids now, one thing that I feel very strongly, I noticed much more than, of course, I did when I was a kid, is the way that they tried to deal with universals in the depiction of the gods, the goddesses, all of the spirits, all of the muses. And in that sense, there's a kind of an archetypal expression in the images that, of course, the myths themselves take on very intelligently. And it seems to me that, there's a connection between mythology, astronomy, cosmology, sound here. And I'd be interested in hearing how all of you have personally and together explored or uncovered those connections between the deep structure, deep time, mythology, which is part of the technical vocabulary, of course, that Luke deals with, the perhaps emotional and structural vocabulary, sonic vocabulary that Alvaro deals with, and the narrative vocabulary, David, that you deal with.
Well, who wants to go? Hit that one. Thank you. Well, let me just continue, because I have a further thought on what I said. One of the Campbell quotes that I really love is that, and I'm going to paraphrase, is that, and I think I said it there, that our myths have to be refreshed by our knowledge, or else they calcify. And that as more knowledge comes into play, we have to find a way of expanding the stories we tell ourselves about who we are, what this is. And if we don't, this is where orthodoxy becomes fascistic and reductive. And we see that happening all around us, where closed systems of thinking, closed systems of governance, closed systems of thought, we can track that to closed systems of information gathering and the inability to integrate that into our refreshed identity. And the other, great mind on this for me was Abraham Maslow, psychologist, who once in our hierarchy of needs, we begin, we have to have food, clothing, and shelter. Then we need different kinds of social comforts. We need love and attention. We need gratitude. But as we gather these things, we begin to have a more expansive identification. Something profound happened for me, I guess it was 2006, when I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. And towards the summit, it was the darkest night I'd ever seen, but also the brightest night. The stars were, I can't even begin. But something happened up there, and that was because of the way the light was that night, and there was no moon, that I saw, and Luke, you got to back me up on this. I saw the arms of our home galaxy with my two eyes. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't expect to see that. I didn't know it was possible, but I could see the swirl of the home galaxy, of our Milky Way galaxy. And once you can sort of see that in 3 dimensions, at least I had to reframe where I belonged. Like there was a positioning, and you as a designer, the perspective that you get really changes how you make meaning of it. So anyway, this connection between meaning making and mythology as we gather deeper and deeper information about the universe that we are a part of. This is for me personally why this project is exciting, because I'm growing so much through Luke's guidance, really, and the elucidation of what we do know. It's mind-blowing, but that's a good thing.
That's fantastic. I've spent some time climbing, although not mountains, but I'm pretty obsessed with what it means to experience something like the overview effect. And you're talking about an inverse, where instead of being in orbit and flying over our planet, you're at a place on our planet where you suddenly feel like, well, I remember feeling this when I was very young, feel like you could fall off because the void is right in front of you. It's right there. And so you have an overview of the stars, of the galaxy, of the moon. And it makes me think of deep structure again, this idea of deep time and universal structures, whether it's in math and physics or in sound. Alvaro, I was wondering what's going on when you're responding to some of the, as you said, the visual content, but it's more than just visual content. It's geometric content, it's mathematical ratios. In our conversation a few days ago, you were talking about the golden ratio and ways that one would find that occurring in the self-sorting systems of our solar system. Jupiter protecting other planets from the asteroids after the early bombardment, and so forth. And so, Alvaro, I wonder if you could meditate a little bit on that. When you make the sounds, the soundscapes, the compositions, the performance. How do you put yourself in touch with those deep structures, which are, for me, analogous to what David was just talking about?
I think I have two. There's two sides to it. One is functioning purely at an intuitive level, meaning I'm reacting. I consider myself both a composer and an improviser. Right? It all depends on context. So this project started basically as a stage project, a stage show, and I will be mostly improvising to what was happening around me. Right? So that was pure intuition, because I knew I had the script, I had the ideas, all the physics behind the videos and the concepts and all these things, but I will be mostly reacting at an intuitive level, meaning I had digested all that information, and then I would let that go, and I would let go of that and just try to catalyze that information into sonic strategies, basically. So then when we shifted our process into making videos, now I have more time to think about these things. So I've been tweaking my process a bit and using more, putting more intention, like more rational intention, more predetermined intention behind some of the choices that I'm making. So, for instance, going back to that reference the thing you just mentioned about the golden ratio, for this particular project, something very interesting that I found when we were beginning to prepare for it. Luke shared this chart with us with facts about the planets in the solar system, right? Including mass, diameter, gravity, the length of the day, the velocity of their orbits, and blah, blah, blah. Tons of different details. And I was very curious about this because immediately I had a chart that literally looked to me like an algorithmic score. I could start assigning data to musical ideas, to ratios for delays. You know about this stuff, right?
Yes,
So,
yeah.
the rate of modulation, the rate of time signatures, polyrhythmic figures, things like that. So for this particular thing, I stumbled upon this study that theorizes that if the measurement of, I'm going to read this because it's a little tricky. So if the measurement of orbital distances is started from Mercury, which is the first planet of the solar system, rather than Earth, which is the third, and the average of the planet orbital distances of each following planet is taken in relation to the one before it, the value will approximate very closely the golden ratio. That average is 1.6187, and the golden ratio is 1.6189. So that is super close. So that, I don't know if this is a theory. I don't know how Luke should look into this because I don't know how real this is. Okay, but this was real to me because this triggered the whole piece basically. For instance, the main motif, it's a gamelan-inspired melody that I wrote in 13/8. If you divide 13 by 8, you get 161/8, which is the golden ratio. And that information was also used in the modulation rate of delay lines that I have going on in the background. So with this delay plugin that I have from Eventide, you can set the modulation in certain in specific cents. So it's going 3, 5, 8, 13, and then it goes backwards. So basically, the modulation is creating a spiral as it goes, right?
Beautiful. Yeah.
So that's the main thing on this one.
That's really interesting. I want to float that to Luke. Alvaro, it's really interesting in the sense that you have a very rational structure that is linked back to some of the implicit mathematics that you understand, which also gets paired up with an intuitive reaction to what you know about the universe and to the information that you're receiving from Luke and from David. And finding the human right in the center of that, kind of bridge between the rational and the critically intuitive or the purely intuitive is a really, really interesting place for me. Luke, to bring that to you, I wonder where you see the relationship between the rules of physics and math and the way that the soundscapes have evolved in the project, and also the way that David has articulated the questions that emerge around myth structure and deep time and what it means for us to find these places where we break out of the constraints of controlled storytelling so that we can continue to, if I'd be so bold, we continue to be open-minded and to evolve. So again, Luke, where's that relationship between what you know of physics and math and these other systems?
I think the similarity that I see foremost is the role of observation, using our senses, and how that enables an evolution of our understanding. And when we feel like we understand something, then we tell a story. We create a myth, create a narrative. I'll tell one story very briefly that's related to the planetary orbits that Elro was referring to, and that is that in 1995, David referred to this in one of his poems for this episode, when the first planets were planetary exoplanets, planets orbiting other stars, were beginning to emerge. We thought we understood what a solar system was because we live in one. And what we saw, because of a bias in our observations, was planets much, much more massive than Jupiter orbiting much closer to their star than Mercury orbits our sun.
Oh, my goodness.
And the reason for that is because the tools that we were using were only sensitive to very massive planets orbiting their stars very close. Yeah. Nevertheless, we began to wonder, what is a planet? This is when the idea of Pluto not being a planet was really born, and that's why we have had that debate, and why it now is, we usually refer to it as a dwarf planet, because we saw these systems, as David said, now thousands of them, that are nothing like our solar system. We also have been creating models of that follow what we know of physics, mostly the gravitational force, but applied to individual molecules of gas and individual dust particles in a forming solar system. What we see is that planets migrate. They migrate in and out as they evolve. And the solar system that we see in our own solar system, we see as static. I mean, there's obviously motion, there's orbital motion, but the planets have these different distances that don't change. But the reason that we think that is because we've only been around for we've only been noticing these things for at most a few millennia, and really in detail just a few centuries. But the physical nature of these systems is evolving, and they do relax into an ordered system where these ratios that Elro noticed and incorporated into the soundscape for this episode are the natural result.
Fantastic. And I mean, we've all heard the phrase, the music of the spheres. I'm just wondering where, Luke, for you, that takes on either a poetic evocation or a technical meaning.
Yeah, it really does. I love that these concepts inspire music. Quite famously, Johannes Kepler was interested in understanding our solar system and in terms of Pythagorean solids and musical theory, and finally had to give up a one-to-one sort of analogy with these ratios, because they didn't match what we actually observe in the solar system. So that 1,000th decimal place that is so amazing. It's so amazing that the planetary distances and orbits come to this ratio that keeps coming up in natural systems, from biological systems to cosmological systems. Nevertheless, it's not quite the same. It's not quite the exact ratio, and that difference enabled Johannes Kepler to suggest that the orbits are elliptical rather than circular, and which has enabled us to understand not just our solar system, but the formation of solar systems in general. So the role of observation, again, really is key in my view.
Fantastic. We have this question from Robert Melikian. Question for Luke. Spectral information from our astronomical observations can and have been converted into sonic information. Luke, is there scientific value in these exercises?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So if we're fortunate enough to have full human vision, usually our sense of sight is the most profound in our experience of the universe. And if we set that aside, usually it's our sense of hearing, at least remote. Those are our remote senses. We can see things that are far away. We can hear things that are far away. Both of those are related physically to waves, sound waves or light waves. And so we can translate between waves of sound, which have certain wavelengths and frequencies, which we perceive as colors, to wavelengths of, sorry, did I say sound? I meant light.
Light,
to wavelengths
yeah,
of sound, which of course the frequencies and wavelengths correspond to pitch. And use it so we can translate the spectral information that enables us to understand that a planet is orbiting a star without actually being able to see the planet. We've seen literally a handful of planets orbiting other stars. They're the very closest ones. The rest of those thousands that David referred to in his poem, we see indirectly because of the colors of light that they emit. And translating that to sound can enable us to experience it in a way that jogs our senses. You know, when you have to rely on a sense that isn't the primary one. We can see detail that or hear detail in the case of Robert's question that we wouldn't necessarily be able to see. So there's definitely not only aesthetic value, but scientific value in the sense that it may be able to may help us interpret these observations more effectively.
Very, very interesting. You know, David. There's a question for Alvaro. Alvaro, can you see that question?
Yes.
Throughout most of the video, the music doesn't sound like it's played on a guitar, more like a synth or keyboard, perhaps. How do you achieve those atmospheric sounds?
Short answer, a volume pedal. So the guitar has a very percussive nature, right? You strike a string, strike a note, and you hear a buck, and then the note, usually, right? So there's a hit, and then the fundamental with its overtones. So if you put a volume pedal or use your volume knob on the guitar, you remove that percussiveness and add a more ethereal element to the sound by making the note bloom progressively. And that can remind you of a cello or strings or a synth patch. It helps gaining a vocal quality to the sound. And I also, for this piece, the background music during the narration is played through a reverse delay. There's a reverse granular delay that plays the repeats both backwards and forwards,
Yeah.
at a rate that I'm controlling with my foot on an expression pedal. So you never hear the attack of the note, but it's going both forwards and backwards at the same time.
Beautiful. I understood that as a guitarist. I also wonder how much control you have over that, because you mentioned that you have the ability to grab specific numeric values and ratios and plug them into the delay systems that you're using, which either you could pre-program, I assume, or potentially modify in real time.
It's both. It depends.
Yep.
It depends on the piece. It depends on what I'm doing for this project, and because of the nature of how we're doing things now. I'm writing for the video. The video has already a predetermined length. So in the videos, there's less improvisation, whereas the live context, there's more room for me to go on tangents, come back. So for this, for the reverse delays, that is completely live. That kind of thing, I'm controlling it by ear.
Yep.
But I am very, very picky and meticulous about it. So I spend a lot of time working with my pedals and stuff to really learn them inside out. I'm a total control freak before the live performance. Yep. So if I'm practicing, I want to know everything about the tool that I have, so that then when I'm playing live or recording, I don't think about it, right? So for the ratio delays, those were pre-programmed. Yeah, yes. I couldn't do that live because there's a lot of tweaking that you need to program those things. But once it's done, then the control over it is completely intentional.
Yes. Yeah. Fantastic. Perhaps you can drop a link to some of your current work into the chat.
Yes.
That would be great.
I have a new album out. So do you. I'm gonna leave both links in the YouTube.
Oh, thank you.
I'd like to just jump in and Ed, I think the work that you're doing is fascinating. I'm so glad that Alvaro brought you in. I found something that you wrote, and I just want to put that up and have you just give us a little bit of your thinking on this.
Thanks. Well, one of the things that I say in my post-planetary design seminars is that the entire project is a kind of bait and switch. It sounds great to be talking about post-planetary design and to be reading great science fiction and watching really awesome science fiction movies, which I love and have been obsessed with since I was a little kid. But it's also about trying to understand what universal rule systems are that apply here and that made our planet and made life on Earth what it is. And so, we make the usual joke, is there a planet B? There may be no planet B. Yes, we just landed on Mars, and I was ecstatic to see those images come back. And I do think that we might be able to live on Mars. And I do think it's extremely important for humans to get to Mars. We need to have people out there on the moon, on Mars, on the moons of Saturn. We need to have people out in the asteroid belts so that Earth isn't our only home, at least a little bit. And living on Mars is a century-long, 2-century-long, 3-century-long project. Kim Stanley Robinson, the science fiction author, who's also an extremely brilliant historian and geopolitical theoretician, if you will, speculator, has written many, many books about inhabitation in our solar system. His fairly recent book, Aurora, looks at a generation ship voyage. We've spoken to Kim Stanley Robinson a number of times in my seminars. He's incredibly generous and kind about giving his time to the students. And he makes it very clear that what he's trying to do is draw attention to the situation that we have on Earth right now. 2312 is trying to jump 300 years into the future to try to understand how we're failing right now, right here. And so one of the things that I've been very motivated by in the post-planetary design seminars and the design studios that we've run, and my partner and wife, Carla Leitao, also in her Oblivion design studios and seminars, her planetology design studios and seminars, we're always looking for the connection between really long arcs of time, the 100,000-year arc, the 35,000, 40,000-year arc, the 5 million-year arc, the billion-year arc, and what's happening right here, so that we can better understand how to handle what challenges we're faced with right now, both in a pragmatic way. How do we design for the planet? Buckminster Fuller dealt with this. How do we design infrastructure for a planet to save the planet, literally, to be a steward, as you folks put it in your mission statement, a better steward for the planet. And also on a poetic level, to try to understand how we're situated in the universe. What does it mean to lay in a field in the middle of the night and watch shooting stars and feel like some mysterious force is holding you from falling off into the infinite space that lies directly out in front of you? So those are some of the things that have driven the teaching work and some of the research work and design work that we've done. Alvaro and I have talked a little bit about this in terms of my attempts to return to music. Initially, I was trained as a performer and a composer a long time ago, back in the 80s. And for me, it's connected, Alvaro, to one of the things that you were describing a moment ago, that it's a bridge between extremely rational ways of approaching our world and trusting also to a very deep source of intuition. And intuition
Absolutely.
is this kind of deep, deep oceanic current that has a computational ability to take multiple flows of information in and synthesize them and to produce some new bridge between what we understand rationally and what we don't understand rationally. And David, I saw that in your use of the metaphor of the three little bears and the just right place. This is just the right temperature. And of course, we're in the Goldilocks zone. We're in just the right place for water to not always be frozen or not always to be vapor. David, if I could toss that back to you, you were relating this this metaphor from Three Little Bears to the evolution of human discovery and the realities of our planetary system and our position in the universe. How does that work for you when you're trying to bridge between deep time archetypes and human narrative, and then the cosmological that Luke is working with?
Well, gotta keep you around, Ed. Just keeping us on our toes, man. It's like good. Well, I love where you just were, which is about intuition, and it opens into a space of the unconscious mind and the subconscious mind, where the unconscious mind does not reject. It's everything that we have been exposed to is retained. Then there are these moments where, and situations where things bubble up and make connections. And that might be my, whatever, 10-cent description of what intuition is. It doesn't come from nowhere.
Yes.
It comes from somewhere. And that somewhere is hard to name, because we are these profound organisms of senses, sensation, and awareness. Labeling, putting language on our senses, our sensory experience, is a secondary part of this, very critical, important. But we're aware how the light changes, the subtleties of sound, what things feel like when we observe, what our emotions are coming to being sprung from. You know, all of this is, for a lifetime, is embedded and formed and kind of resting and shaping who we are deep within our own selves. And I would dare say that that is a commonality in this organism that we share, and probably in other organisms as well. So there's a kind of what you might call it, a kind of an archetypal seed of I'm going to use a word here, awareness, of awareness.
Yes.
And so when I'm doing this work and throughout these episodes, there's there's this thing in it of go with the first choice, trust the first choice, because that is generally where the unconscious mind is. Boom, there's an opportunity to solve, if you will, to get, you know what I mean, to solve the moment. And the unconscious mind is already there before the conscious mind can even tackle it.
Yes.
And I think both you and Alvaro, as improvisers, you know this. You've studied so much. You have this so much in your fingers, in your ears, but also within the fullness of your being. So when it comes to that moment of improvisation, it is there. It's not, I'm going to do this. No, it is there. And this is the first choice. And even though the first choice might finally get edited and revised, but there's something about first choice when we're faced with, I think, any kind of creative problem, whether it's in poetics or music or in, astronomical research. This is, again, intuitive, but it's coming out of what I might call a deep well of sensory knowledge, sensory, information that gets synthesized and articulated. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's what I felt like saying. How about that?
Yeah, it totally gets at what I was thinking of. I know, Luke, I'm reminded of a noted mathematician. His name was Srinivasa Ramunujan. And I remember reading about Ramunujan many years ago, and I think it was in a book by Douglas Hofstadter. I'm not sure if it was Hofstadter, but I think it was. But the anecdote about Ramunujan was that he claimed that he got his answers for some of the mathematical problems he was thinking about directly from the goddesses and the gods. He just knew them. And I think, if I remember correctly, again, I hope I do, about half of the answers he just got out of pure intuition were right, and about half of them were wrong. And I don't know if anyone has ever done a deep, historical unpacking of that. But here we're talking about someone who is a mathematician, a fairly renowned mathematician, who simply claimed to be receiving this information from a kind of a non-human being. And I'm wondering, if there are any forms of intuition for you as a physicist or a mathematician, which are either related to that or to the poesis that David is talking about.
Well, I have to correct you. I'm definitely a physicist, but I am only a practitioner of mathematics, not a mathematician. However, there is definitely physical intuition, and I think that what David said it really well. That we have these senses, and we're so intimately plugged into them that they can tell us about our universe, about our immediate universe, close by or more distant, without us actually knowing that they're talking or that they're communicating with us. So that's how I see physical intuition. In fact, when I'm teaching physics with my students, we often talk about this, that some of the labs that we do in class or the activities we do are to develop our intuition, which you can develop just like you can develop physical fitness, so that we can gain or begin to discuss a deeper understanding of the physical concept. So in other words, we have to experience what we're trying to describe and explain. And that's how I see intuition. And so I can definitely see how someone could really, really believe and feel as though some revelation was really coming out of the cosmos and almost have nothing to do with the person. But I can't say I quite believe that. I think he sold himself a bit short. And I think there was a lot more to do with sensing sensations.
The idea of, I think we're almost out of time, but I know there's another question for David from Robert Melikian. Before I float that to you, David, I just wanted to comment on that idea of embodied knowledge, Luke. There's a historian, Gary Tomlinson, who's written an extraordinary book called A Million Years of Music. And I think all three of you would, and everyone in the audience would be fascinated by this book. But one of the contentions that Gary makes in this book is that pre-humans were living for hundreds of thousands of years in an extremely active sonic landscape. They lived in a world where they made a lot of sound. And they didn't have a written history. They didn't even really have much of a linguistic capability to convey information to their descendants and their colleagues, their friends, other humans. So they experimented. And through their senses, over literally hundreds of thousands of years, they embedded through their interactions with what he calls a taskscape, they embedded a series of gestures, which through these feedback loops produced what we are as humans now. And that idea of embedded experience through the senses over a much longer time than we usually think we can get a grasp on is actually what produced the kind of contemporary modern mind that we have as humans right now. It was part of the feedback loops that then led to externalized linguistic structure through the interaction with this non-linguistic, inchoate, incredibly long arc over time soundscape and taskscape. And I've been fascinated. I organized a conference around some of these ideas a few years ago, and Gary came and spoke at it. And he's an incredibly beautiful guy. But I've been fascinated with this for a number of years, and it seems to me that it ties back into that idea of embeddedness that we keep looping around to. We did have this question from Robert Melikian for David. He says, David, I loved your reference to SETI. Are there other human ventures that particularly inspire your work here? And I think that could be a great closing question for David and for everyone.
Well, I'll say, yeah, I mean, let's see, that little part of the poem was, to proclaim the existence of exoplanets was heresy, then hyperbole, then hypothesis, then holy shit. It takes something to put a four-letter word into a public poem, but I think I earned it in that case, not only for the alliteration, but holy shit. When this kind of speculation that is immemorial. I mean, people look at stars since forever, right? And I wonder if there are other places like this, and then it actually comes into our realm of the known, right? So SETI, I mean, ready, SETI, go. One of the folks that we had as a moderator in one of our episodes was one of Luke's colleagues, whose name I forget. What was his name again, Luke?
Simon Steele from
Simon.
from the SETI Institute.
From the SETI Institute. So that was really exciting. Other realms of human, gosh, of Robert's question is so big. Let me just say that something that for me that's particularly important here is what's happening in the here and now with truth telling. This change in our politic, moving toward having to defend the institution of fact and truth. And I don't know if it's a discipline, but it's something like, it's kind of shocking that we have to do this, but this is the ground that we're in. And I think this goes back to the terror of change, the terror of adjusting our mindset as things change. In our country, there's a lot of change going on. And the reactionary movement to change, and the reassurance people get from these old structures of power and oppression. So here we are in a very real space of change and transformation, and the courage to move forward. I just watched the Amanda Gorman poem again this morning. The courage to have love as our legacy versus this reactionary movement towards dominance. So this is something that this project, as spaced out as it is about the intersection of truth and growth, expansion. And our next episode, we land on this beautiful, powerful, resilient, and right now fragile, endangered planet.
Beautiful. Beautifully said.
That as they say, that could be a great place to wrap, right?
Well, it's not what I meant to do, but up to you.
I think so. Yeah, that would be terrific. Well, I want to thank all of you for inviting me in to have this great conversation with you. Wait, is there another comment coming in? Hang on a second. I see something popping up here. Okay, no, not yet. God is a metaphor. Yes. Well, that did pop up there, did it not?
Yep.
It did. I guess we lost Luke somewhere. I don't know if Luke got checked out somewhere.
He might have had to jump, perhaps.
Yeah. All right.
Well, perhaps we should wrap up again on that beautiful expression. David, from you. Oh, there's Luke. He's back. So I just wanted to thank everybody, all of you, for inviting me to have this great conversation with you, and say goodnight. Thanks to the audience for joining us, and I look forward to the next episode.
Thanks so much, Ed.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Ed.
Pleasure. Thank you all of you.
Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Bye now.